Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, I'm Lauren McCormack with RTI International, and I'm going to be talking with you today about infusing health literacy into a couple of the clinical trials that we're working on at RTI. One is an R01 related to Fragile X syndrome, and for those of you who are not familiar with Fragile X, it's a common intellectual disability, and it tends to affect males worse than females. I'll also be talking about a PCORI-funded pragmatic trial in which we're enrolling about 1,000 patients who are in chronic pain, and it is a study with UNC, Duke, and Vanderbilt working collaboratively on a multi-site trial. Okay. So I will be focusing on the informed consent process as well to add to what we heard this morning. I'd like to acknowledge the team. Nothing in this field gets done alone, and one of the nice things about working with a collaboration like this is we got folks in informatics, health literacy, the content expertise, so bringing that all together I think is really critical, as long as you all can learn each other's language and talk to each other, so that's really a core part of it. So I will share just one slide in terms of kind of what's not working to kind of resonate with this morning's session and then move on to some solutions. But I think one of the challenges we're seeing is this lack of bidirectional communication, people being overwhelmed with forms, sometimes signing these forms where they really don't understand the consent. And some patients are feeling pressured to sign them, even though a trials manager or research coordinator may not be pressuring someone. They just feel that they should do this because they're concerned, if I don't, what will happen to my care? So people are frequently misunderstanding the rationale and the design of these studies. One of the areas that trips people up a lot is randomization. They don't understand that they will be potentially 50% chance of being in an arm in which they're not going to receive the treatment or the drug. So we are seeing people dropping out, participant rates of dropout at about 30% for phase 3 clinical trials. And we all know of the challenges of recruitment overall, with 90% of trials failing to achieve their target populations. So I would like to reinforce the hypothesis that if we can do better with explaining to people in the beginning and consenting them to the study, that we are likely to affect these metrics of recruitment and retention over the longer haul. So a couple studies have started to look at the process of improving the consent experience and looking at outcomes and measurement related to comprehension. So I will mention 2 studies by Grady and Beskow that have found that a simplified version of a consent form was just as good as the standard consent form practice. They did find in one study, however, the Beskow study, that it was not superior with the lower education folks. So one of the things I think we really need to be focusing on is looking at subgroup analyses and not just looking at everyone as a whole. And all the references for this are noted at the end of the talk in a slide that I have. Kim and Kim did a study where there was a simplified consent form and was associated with higher levels of objective and subjective understanding. So from a measurement perspective, I think we also need to keep in mind both subjective and objective understanding. Objective being actual measurement and scoring, which is what I'm going to talk a little bit about today with the focus on that measurement piece. Also, use of interactive technology, we all know, has the potential to improve the process, but it also comes with its own set of complications and challenges. And it often cannot replace the human connection. So I think a question for the field is, how do we still obtain that human interaction and connection, but not with the cost and time sink that is involved in that one-to-one interaction with an actual human? All right. Many of you may be familiar with the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, but if you're not, I think it's an important group to be paying attention to. It is a public-private partnership of about 75 different organizations that has made recommendations recently about improving the informed consent process and also areas of patient engagement. So they have some general recommendations and then some recommendations for how to tier the consent form. Their tiering process suggests putting the federally required content up front, which this is your HIPAA language, followed by the IRB required content, and that's in chapters, as well organized using health literacy principles, with an introduction or summary of the clinical trial, either an overview as well. So that's their tiering process. They have also recommended some of the things we've been talking about today, which is training for the people doing the consent process, and also the use of a discussion tool to help people with understanding. The FDA has also been active in this area with their patient-focused drug development initiative, identifying approaches to facilitate patient involvement and minimizing patient burden, asking patients up front if they think that a new drug should be developed in this area before it's initiated, or is there sufficient options currently available. They're doing a lot more with patient preference and trade-off studies using discrete choice analyses and patient preference studies, looking at the benefits and risks. And then they have also offered their EIC document, or electronic informed consent guidance, which went from draft and now into final. So these provide information on how to do e-consent. That's the actual signing portion of the process, and to protect privacy and security of those involved. There's, I think that the National Academies had a recent meeting in November, I believe it was, here in DC on virtual clinical trials. So that is something, I assume the proceedings are in the works on that, to be paying attention to when you are not in the same physical location as a patient that you need to consent. How do you do that? So there was some good discussion at that meeting. Several different meetings in the pharmaceutical industry and the tech industry are now focused on this issue. So I would like to encourage us all to coordinate, share lessons learned, so we're not doing this independently. So that brings me to the value of decision aids, which is what I'm going to talk about and show you some examples of work we've done in this area. But the Cochrane collaboration has done some really good systematic reviews over time that emphasize the importance of personalized decision-making and providing information to people that is tailored and allows them to consider their preferences and values, looking at outcomes such as knowledge and decisional conflict. So the work we've done in developing a decision aid or decision support tool in the field of e-consent, we did a randomized controlled trial to assess the efficacy of an informed consent tool. And the research questions we specifically addressed was, does the tool improve the capacity of individuals to make an informed decision about consenting relative to standard practice? And we had a hypothesis that because this study was in the Fragile X population, in population with intellectual disabilities, there may be a threshold at which, in this population or others, that a tool is more beneficial, and below which that point, maybe it's not going to make a difference. So this is where the subgroup analysis is really important. We had about 100 participants in the study. We had a focus on those who were in the age 12 to 40. However, their reading level was about first grade reading level. So we really needed to bring our materials and the technology down. We used a 2x2 design and stratified it by age and IQ level. We collected the data at 2 points in time in the participant's home, and we collected a battery of tests and information, cognitive function, oral comprehension, verbal memory, and working memory. So we had a lot of data from the first aim of the study that we could use in the analysis in the tool. Okay, moving on. And I will mention, actually one other thing I'll mention on this last slide is that we had two versions of the consent form. One is the paper version, that was our comparison group, and the other version was the tool. The people who received the electronic tool also received the paper version of the consent form. And then the person who was doing the trial in the person's home walked the comparison group through the paper version of the form. So we all need to think about, well, what is standard practice? Standard practice, I would argue, probably varies across different clinical trials. To some extent, I think people and research coordinators are walking their potential study participants through the forms, but maybe not others. And maybe we can be doing a better job here. So on to the measures. We had 4 different measures, and we built our measures based on the MacArthur Competence Assessment Tool for Clinical Research, or the MACCAT. The MACCAT is used to measure decisional capacity, and it was designed as a structured interview process. And so it was open-ended as an interview. We developed closed-ended versions of the MacArthur tool to assess all 4 of these areas: understanding, appreciation, reasoning, and expressing a choice. So you had 13 questions in the understanding area, and that was to assess whether someone understood the purpose of the trial, the risks and benefits of the trial, and their ability to withdraw if they so choose. In the appreciation area, this was assessing the impact of participating in the trial on their own care. So things like, why were you asked to participate in this trial? How is the assignment made? That's the part about randomization. So that's the appreciation component. With reasoning, an example here is, what is one thing you might need to do once you're in the study? And then expressing a choice, asking them actually at the end, do you want to be in the study or do you not? For this Fragile X study, it was a hypothetical trial, so they weren't enrolling in a trial afterwards. I'll just mention that. Okay, so this is the informed consent tool that we developed using certain strategies like plain language and clear communication. Interaction and engagement was an emphasis, and we did this using multimedia communication. We have a values clarification exercise that I'll show you a short clip of in just a moment. But you can start to see the look and the feel of the tool. We have our Dr. Bell here, and she narrates throughout and walks a person through the experience and explains this is actually the first grade reading level. She is one of several avatars that we've developed, and those can be chosen based on the needs of the study. We do a knowledge assessment, but that's optional. You don't have to assess the knowledge, and it's something that we embedded as the person goes through the experience. So they give them a little bit of information about consent. This is what the study's about, and then they'll ask a few knowledge assessment questions. Okay. So these are some other examples of the avatars that can be customized for the target audience and people who interact with the potential study participants. Avatars can vary by their age or gender. Spoken language, we're able to produce multiple languages, including American Sign Language in the tool. Various literacy levels, but obviously sort of with universal precautions, most of it's a lower literacy level. Cultural tailoring is an option as well. And really the human avatar walks the person through to engage them, do that education about the trial, and talks to the person as they move through. We take the protocol and develop different modules that are aligned with IRB required elements, including the study purpose, what the study involves, how it works, the risks and benefits, and then also the ability to withdraw. So these are sort of the standard modules, if you will, but certain trials might need different modules. So we use these in the Fragile X trial and are also using these to some extent in the pain study. Transforming that content to a lower level. One of the benefits here is the standardized presentation of the information, because you've got different human beings consenting different participants across a multi-site study. How sure are you that the information is being standardized? And so that's a protection for both the patient as well as the clinical researchers. So I'm going to show a short clip in just the next slide. It's a video that is a sorting exercise to help with the values clarification, which is important for all decision aids, as we were talking about, where a person drags and drops reasons to be in the study for them as an individual and reasons to not be in the study. And this can be done on an iPad in the clinical setting.
Use your finger to drag a picture to one side of the screen. pick some reasons you might want to be in the study and put them on the left side, and other reasons you might not want to be in the study and put them on the right side. I would have to go to the doctor more often. I might feel sick or tired. I might feel calmer and pay attention easier.
So there are six different tiles in here that are customized to the particular study in the protocol. And so this is where the tailoring part comes in, that we work with the research team or do this ourselves on the study. And that really helps to foster that deliberation and understanding that you do have a choice to make in this experience. Okay, so this is examples of the both understanding question and appreciation question that we've developed for our Fragile X trial on the left and the chronic pain trial on the right, where you can see some of the basic elements of really just understanding the purpose of the trial, and then on the bottom right is what will happen if you no longer want to be in the study. My doctor will be angry, I think, is a common concern among patients, and that is one of the wrong answers. As you'll see, there is one correct answer and 3 incorrect answers so that it can be scored and created into an index. Okay? And the way we scored this is that with, if a person got the question right the first time through, they got 2 points. If they got it right the second time through, because they're able to watch the video clips a second time, they got 1 point. And if they did not get it right on either time, they got 0. So we were able to sum those from 0 to 26 to get somewhat of a score. Okay, so this is the results from the Fragile X study. No significant differences emerged between the experimental group that got the tool and the control group when you looked at the full sample of about 89 patients. But as I mentioned, we had this suspicion that there might be a threshold above which, again, these are very cognitively impaired, intellectually disabled individuals, at which there may be a positive impact. And that was borne out, as you can see here, in the higher IQ subsample, where there were differences on these mean scores. These are scores on a scale of 0 to 100. And you can see the difference between the 96.6 and the 87.7, which is a significant difference. And we also modeled this using a linear regression, controlling for all the other variables that I talked with you about earlier with working memory and oral comprehension. And we saw a positive impact of the tool controlling for those variables in terms of understanding. The areas where we saw the impact in terms of increased or higher comprehension levels was what are the things that I need to do in the study. So those are the operational aspects of it, the responsibilities of the patient. And then also, how will it be decided which study arm that I'm in? So that's the randomization component that we explained with the visual. So that was, we were really excited to see that people understood randomization through the process of the graphical displays. We did not see any differences with the lower IQ subsamples. I didn't show that here. And that was expected. So we've got a few publications out on this work so far. The first is our clinical trial protocol. The paper on the bottom and the paper on the top is describing the process of developing the decision support tool and its impact and goals on decisional capacity. So I think there's a number of different populations that may benefit from this kind of decision support, particularly populations that may require help due to cognitive impairment or intellectual disability like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, populations involving pediatrics who are doing ascent with their adult parents, patients requiring maybe immediate care in the emergency room given some of what we were talking about earlier, and obviously individuals with lower education and health literacy. So the last thing I'll mention today is some of the work that we're doing with regard to infusing health literacy at this enrollment stage and training our research coordinators, having FAQs, having take-home materials, but we are also having actually next week, we'll be having our study advisory committee in which we have 5 chronic pain patients who are serving on our advisory committee helping us to review all of the patient-facing materials, including the consent form, including the brochures, and we're talking with them about the process of what we're doing with their feedback, how we're using it, and showing them how it has affected the patient-facing materials in the trial. So I'll close with this Healthy People slide. This came out last week, work that Cindy Brock has done in Health Affairs, and talked about the percent of people who have said their healthcare provider always involves them in healthcare decisions as much as they wanted, and we're seeing that slight uptick there. So I think that's a promising way to end. So there's the references as promised and contact information. Thank you.